Humans live from, on, and with water. Rivers, canals, lake regions. They have shaped our culture for centuries. They are a place to live, transport arteries, and sources of energy. On 5 journeys, we discover the waterways of Europe. We venture upstream on watercourses broad and narrow in canoes, boats, and ships. Along the way, new projects for the future of water in Europe. Today, the journey takes us to the Netherlands and Belgium. From the North Sea and the port city of Rotterdam, we travel up the Maas. Passing Venlo, Maastricht and Liège, the route follows the Ourthe river into the Belgian Ardennes. The port of Rotterdam. Here, where the Rhine and its tributary, the Maas, flow into the North Sea, is the starting point of a waterbound journey through the Netherlands and Belgium. On canals and through the rivers Maas and Ourthe, the trip wends its way to the Ardennes. What role do waterways play in Europe today? What condition are they in? And how can they be controlled in this age of rising sea levels? We begin at the loading terminal of ThyssenKrupp. Untold quantities of ore and coal for steel production are reloaded around the clock by the cranes in Rotterdam. Pusher tugs bring the material to the blast furnaces of the Ruhr Valley. A convoy of 4 transport units known as lighters carries 11,000 tons of cargo. The trip from the port of Rotterdam to Duisburg takes about 26 hours. The ships are in operation 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Without the barges, only rail transport would remain. But the railway can manage only a fraction of the cargo. We pass through a functionally arranged landscape. Here the water is shaped around humans and their economy. The biggest cargo ships go around the centre of Rotterdam, but our route leads into the heart of the city, whose wealth is founded on its proximity to the sea and inland waterways. Rotterdam is home to by far the largest deep-water port in Europe. Over an area of 100 square kilometers, its terminals handle containers, oil and chemicals. Some 320,000 people's livelihoods depend on the port. Rotterdam, the leading centre of industry and trade in the Netherlands, lies largely below sea level and is protected by dikes. The city centre was completely destroyed by a German air raid during World War II. In reconstructing the city, urban planners opted for a radical new beginning. Many buildings are deliberately modern and avant-garde. Rotterdam is home to many renowned architecture firms. In neighbouring Delft, people are experimenting with a new form of construction and planning. Architect Koen Olthuis no longer builds his buildings on land, but exclusively on the water.
We see many advantages there, including for the environment. Building without a trace. You can place apartments there and then take them away without harming nature. Buildings can rotate with the sun, depending on the season. It's a much more flexible form of building.
This area combines
Normal houses stand for at least 50 years, while everything around them changes. Politics, the economy, the people. But on the water, you can turn buildings, move them, and take them away. This makes the city more flexible, and we can respond much better to its needs.
Winter and outdoor stuff. If you can make a list of that, work for wind and for rain.
And some tiny floats.
Here we
also, this is a bit higher.
When cities become more flexible, the role of the architect also changes. In the past, we simply designed lovely buildings. Today, we're more like DJs. Everything's about the location and how long it should be there. We have a lot of parameters we can tweak to achieve greater balance in the city.
The Netherlands, 1/4 of which is below sea level, is densely populated. Land for construction is expensive. The people live by and with the water, but actually living on the water is only now being tested. In Dordrecht, east of Rotterdam, Koen and his team are building single-family homes, which, though connected to the land, rise and fall with the water level. His vision is to create entire neighborhoods out of such floating buildings. The architects are now receiving inquiries from Shanghai, Miami, and London. With sea levels rising, interest in this new architecture is on the rise as well.
I'm a big fan of the saying, green is good, but blue is better. Sustainability and environmental protection are very important, but we should include water in that much more than we do.
Seeing living on the water as an opportunity is new. It was long associated with risks. The city of Dordrecht was turned into an island by a flood in the 15th century. Three rivers converge in Dordrecht, and their confluence is one of the most travelled waterways in the Netherlands. The journey heads southeast via the Oude Maas and several branches. At the edge of the industrial area, the landscape suddenly appears wild and untouched. Our route passes through Biesbosch National Park. Rangers are on patrol here in their boats every day. This marsh area was formed, like the island of Dordrecht, in the great storm flood of 600 years ago. Through the mixing of seawater and fresh water, the former meadowlands were transformed into a habitat for plants and animals adapted to brackish water. In the vast jungle of human infrastructure, the area almost seems a foreign element. Perhaps areas like the Biesbosch are a luxury that society grants itself. But perhaps they are also important to the integrity of the continent as a whole. The journey continues upstream via the Bergsche Maas. This waterway intersects Rijksweg 27, one of the most important motorways in the Netherlands. Here the Maas forks into two branches. Between them, the Overdiepse Polder, an artificial peninsula created for agriculture. In earlier times, areas like this had to be protected against flooding with high dikes, but people in the Netherlands have meanwhile begun to rethink the issue. The Overdiepse polder was redesigned. Lower dikes now give high water space for controlled flooding. Homes and stables were raised, and the entire area was restructured. Farmers like Nol Hooijmaaijers were initially skeptical.
In the embankment foreland, the area is now flooded once or twice each winter. That doesn't help, but the grass can handle it. We can't be too close-minded about it. In spring, it might take a bit more time to recover, but then we just fertilize 4 weeks later. It was our conscious decision to stay here. Not to mention, and this is very important, that the government said it would cover damages. If something like this happened 2 or 3 years in a row, we wouldn't have a harvest. In that case, you would see for sale signs everywhere around here. It's not our problem, but society's as a whole, and we want to help. The state says, okay, then you won't have to bear the severest consequences. It assumes the risk, and we are compensated.
The redesign of the dike is part of the large-scale Delta program, with which the Netherlands is responding to rising sea levels. Project manager Koos Bergsche had to do a lot of persuading.
We talked with everyone affected by it early on. The plan wasn't too advanced, but there were some initial ideas. We asked the farmers to share their ideas. We wanted to ensure that it wasn't just the ministry in The Hague that decided, but the water authorities, towns, districts and the ministry together.
After devastating floods in the 1990s, it first appeared that the dikes would have to be made higher and higher. Today, the idea is to deliberately open up some areas for flooding.
With the new challenge of climate change, we are learning that the word delta, i.e. the finding of solutions, is actually larger than the 4-year legislative terms of our democracy. We need guidelines that apply over decades, legal regulations and financial resources that are independent of the decisions that are remade every 4 years. The Delta program is therefore very important and shows that it is possible to create guidelines for the development of our country.
About 10 kilometers upstream lies the fortress town of Heusden, completely surrounded by water. The old town is built around one of the oldest moated castles in Europe. We proceed further east on the Maas. Here they still use the conventional method of high dikes, ideal for cycling and walking. The grass is kept short by herds of sheep, which also tamp down the soil with their hooves. The passing scenery is a typical mix of nature, industry and wastelands that one sees along many European waterways. After an hour and a half, we branch off the main channel of the Maas and come to 's-Hertogenbosch, capital of the Dutch province of North Brabant. Surrounded by a swamp, the medieval city was once regarded as impregnable. Today, the Binnendietze, the city's sprawling canal system, can be explored by boat. Beyond 's-Hertogenbosch, we venture further up the Maas in a motorboat. Through branches of the river, we reach the Leukermeer Nature Reserve. Several families armed with rubbish bags, grippers and smartphones have gathered to tidy up the area. And, by the way, digitally catalogue every piece of trash. It's World Cleanup Day, a worldwide day of action in the fight against waste. Jeroen Dagevoors of the Plastic Soup Foundation is one of the organisers.
The plastic soup starts right outside the front door, your front door. The plastic moves to the seas via the waterways and ultimately becomes a soup of micro and nanoplastics there. And that's very difficult to get rid of. That's why we want to go to the source, to capture the plastic in the rivers and get an overview of the problem so we can attack it at the roots.
But where exactly does plastic get into the environment? Which packages end up in the landscape? To find out, the environmental activists have developed an app called Literati, in which the volunteers can easily record each piece of trash with photos and GPS. This data provides information about the scale of the pollution.
In the Netherlands, we literally live with the water and are very proud of that as a nation. It is perhaps not surprising then that many initiatives to do something against the plastic soup are launched here. Water plays a big role in the distribution of plastic in the world. It has a massive reach, stretching to the oceans of the world. And our river project should have that sort of reach as well. We're starting in the Netherlands, but we want to take it to the rivers in Germany, France, Belgium and Switzerland. We want to involve all countries and get to the source of the pollution and solve the problem there.
A few kilometers to the northeast, the Maas passes the steam pump station de Tuut, built in 1918. Of the 34 stations of this type that once existed in the region, de Tuut is the last one remaining, as a museum exhibit. On some select days in the year, it is fired up for demonstration purposes, although the actual work is performed by diesel engines today. Only a few people still know how the facility works. The steam pump stations once contributed substantially to the region's prosperity because they enabled agriculture in areas that regularly stood underwater. De Tuut did not run continuously. It was only put into operation when the water was running high. It could drain an area of 100 square kilometers. De Tuut reminds us of the engineering feats that were necessary to make large parts of the Netherlands into the landscape we know today. Although a museum piece now, the steam machine is still operable and can be used in flood situations at any time. Whether that will ever be necessary again, no one knows. From Appeltern, we continue along the Maas, heading eastwards. Here, the river separates the land into the regions of Limburg and North Brabant. Further onwards, we skirt the Leukermeer, popular with leisure boats and holidaymakers. After half an hour, the warehouses and cranes of the inland port of Wanssum appear on the horizon. In 1993 and 1995, the area suffered two major floods. The economic damage was enormous. Emergency dikes were built to provide some short-term protection. The disaster made clear that cosmetic measures would not suffice in the future. Hydraulic engineer Keesjan van den Herik is responsible for the Oojen-Wanssum Regional Development Project.
What we see here is the old bridge. It is very small, but this raised road blocked this entire branch of the Maas as it used to flow. In high water, it can't pass here at all. And that's why we're now making this much larger. This entire part here will be torn down. We will build a new bridge. It will start here and stretch to those pillars back there. A new opening will be created here, dredged quite deep. The building will be demolished so that the water can flow through unimpeded.
The major re-engineering measures on Dutch waterways reflect a shift in thinking, prompted by projections about the effects of climate change. Watercourses here have always been changed dramatically. Humans have been forced to learn how to be flexible for centuries.
This bottleneck could only form in the first place because there were no floods between 1926 and 1993. This branch of the Maas did not flow at the time, which is why this road was built here, along with the old city hall with the restaurant and the petrol station. At the time, they simply didn't know that that was also part of the water system. We're now restructuring the entire system so that it's ready for the future and climate change.
Their pragmatic approach to water, its use and its delimitation has made the Dutch specialists in the field. Their expertise is in demand around the world. On the way upstream, a variety of construction projects, all belonging to the Oojen-Wanssum Regional Development Project, come into view. At this location, the Maas is developed for large vessel traffic. It is the longest tributary of the Rhine and further upstream stretches into Belgium and France. Here, on the small strip between the Maas and the German border, there is a unique landscape, the Maas Dunes. Fine alluvial sand deposits have gradually formed into dunes through the constant wind. Plants were introduced at the end of the 19th century to prevent erosion, a hilly heath covered in grasses and heather. The Maas Dunes have been one of the Netherlands' 20 national parks since 1998. About 15 kilometers south of the Maas Dunes, the river passes the city of Venlo. With its roughly 100,000 inhabitants, it is considered a small, big city. The Romans were here. It's a strategically favorable location because shipments traveled, more than now, via waterways. Venlo was a coveted spoil for various occupiers and was ruled by Spain and France at different times. Today, the old town draws German and Belgian tourists who come to shop. One popular setting for photographs is the City Hall building from the 16th century. It has served as a prison, an auction hall for eggs, and a telephone exchange. We follow the Maas upstream, now making our way towards Belgium. Hydraulic engineering in the Netherlands began long before industrialization. They used windmills to power pumps. Drainage mainly benefited agriculture. The soils here are regarded as exceptionally fertile. The highly successful Dutch flower cultivation, however, is no longer reliant on good soil. In a modern greenhouse, the degree of automation is high. In this family-run operation, plants are grown throughout the year in an area larger than 2 football pitches. The employees raise millions of flowers here. The Netherlands is by some distance the biggest producer of ornamental plants in the world. The next city to emerge on the horizon is Roermond, with its striking round tower and port where the Ruhr flows into the Maas. The port is also home to black swans. Near Roermond, the Maas becomes a water sport destination. In rowing boats, we make our way upstream towards the Belgian border. The Rowing Association of Roermond has been in existence since 1896. Today the club is called Aeneas, named after a figure of Greek mythology. The oldest active member is over 80 years old and still mans the oars. Here, the river, by turns a highway for industry, nature reserve, residential location and hazard for humans, is a path on which to find oneself and one's own rhythm. South of Roermond, the Maas is a border river between the Netherlands and Belgium. Ship traffic is routed into the Juliana Canal. The Maas itself is not navigable here. The small town of Elsloo lies on 2 parallel waterways. The actual river was restored to its original condition. A citizens' initiative pushed to have the Maas return to its natural state. This is how European rivers originally looked: shallow and meandering, dotted with sandbars. In a flood, the water can spread out unimpeded here, reducing the impact on cities downstream. Wild horses keep the grass matted down and the banks from becoming overgrown. Wild bulls do their part as well. Maastricht, half an hour upstream. The university city lies in the extreme southeast of the Netherlands, between Germany and Belgium. Its location at the 3-country border lends it a cosmopolitan flair. A full 30% of the students come from Germany. We continue southwards aboard a pleasure steamer. The border between Wallonia in Belgium and the Netherlands runs alternately along the left and right banks of the Maas. Then, the Belgian city of Liège, cultural centre of the French-speaking province of Wallonia. A water sport that has spread from Paris to many major cities of Europe is popular here: street fishing. The trend is distinguished from good old angling mainly by its hip attitude and coolness factor. Liège has an active scene that is by no means put off by inclement weather. The angling enthusiasts don't need much equipment. Minimalism is part of the whole idea. The perch is not destined for the frying pan but a photographic trophy on social media. Then it is returned to the water. At this point in Liège, the Ourthe flows into the Maas from the right. Before us lie the Ardennes, a hilly forest region that spans Belgium, France and Luxembourg. The Ourthe is only navigable in its lower course. In the Ardennes, it plays no role as a conduit of transport. The landscape is characterized by high plateaus, steep gorges and picturesque towns like La Roche-en-Ardenne. The Ardennes became more widely known through the World War II battle, in which more than 1 million soldiers took part. Hitler's attempt to wreak major damage on the Allies with an offensive failed in the winter of 1944. In a valley near Érezé, large round water basins catch the eye. They serve as a way station and breeding grounds for an aquatic species that was absent from the Ardennes for decades. It's feeding time for the salmon. An international program with funding to the tune of millions is working to advance the reintroduction of salmonids in the river of the Ardennes as well as the Netherlands. As head of the program, Xavier Rollin has been working on the ambitious reintroduction project for many years.
At present, we're capturing all the salmon that swim upstream in the Maas. We bring them to our hall, but only temporarily. As soon as we have a sufficient number of salmon, we let them breed naturally. In recent years, we had just about 50 per year that swam upstream, which is not a viable population. That's why we capture them and conduct artificial reproduction. We are currently approaching the reproduction period. The males get very aggressive toward the females. So we have to separate them until the breeding time in order to ensure that the females are not injured by the males.
At the beginning, the scientists had to import the salmon eggs from France, Ireland and Scotland. Then the breeding started, followed by release into the Ourthe. The first specimens have, meanwhile, completed the migration to the sea and back for the first time in many years. One reason for that was the improved water quality in the Ardennes.
Decades ago, the rivers of the Ardennes were in a lamentable state. But in 2015, the EU required the country to ensure good water quality. That made a real difference.
The biggest obstacle for salmon migration, however, is the tide locks that protect the Netherlands against flooding downstream. They are insurmountable for the salmon on their way to the North Sea. The growers have therefore not yet achieved the big breakthrough. International agreements have yielded some grounds for optimism. Openings for fish are now installed in tide locks and other locks. Yet climate change threatens to bring new problems.
Over the past few years, we have repeatedly had long stretches with very low water levels, like right now, as we see very clearly on the N. The water temperature rises significantly, as it did this summer. It's a problem, particularly for the salmon, which have a hard time surviving above a certain temperature. They have to retreat into holes where the water is a bit cooler. Now we are expecting rain that will raise the water level in autumn.
At the research grounds, the N, a tributary of the Ourthe, flows by. A group of young salmon are set to be released today. The idea is for the paar, the name for juvenile salmon, to find their way from here, through the Ourthe, the Maas and the Rhine, into the North Sea and then return for spawning. An incredible journey for such a small being.
The habitat of water has moved me since I was a child because it is a very mysterious world. I always wanted to find out how life in the water works. What is present there? What is hiding in the water? Because there's a lot you don't see. And the salmon is a special symbol with a complex life cycle, which stretches from fresh water all the way to the sea. It has to do with the complexity of life and its mysteries. And that really touches me.
We continue along the Ourthe. We pass by Durbuy, reputed to be the smallest city in the world, across the high plateau of the eastern Ardennes, which now in autumn is shrouded in clouds. All the way to the reservoir of Nisramont. A dream for nature lovers and photographers. Martin Delicourt is both.
I like to wake up very early in order to be out in nature before the sun comes up, when the first light shines through between the trees. In the morning, there is often fog and high humidity, which lends the landscape an air of mystery. The lake of Nisramont in particular, it's a little Canada, magical, especially in autumn because of the colors.
Martin grew up in this area. He studied in Liège and worked as a photographer there, only to return back here. The landscape around the lake is both a photographic motif and his home.
The Ourthe is a river that I especially like here in the Ardennes because of its wild character. It winds its way through little valleys, rocks and forests. It creates a sense of wilderness. There is no sign of human presence, just a little path on the shore. These are places that are very interesting photographically. You can capture unique scenes that evoke memories of nature without people.
From this viewpoint, it can be seen how the waters of the Ourthe have eaten deeply into the limestone. In the final kilometers upstream, the river divides into two branches. They enclose the nature park of the two Ourthes, which forms the heart of the Ardennes.
We all have a smartphone that constantly tries to contact us. But here, without a network, we can re-establish a dialogue with our thoughts, our memories, and that is very important. I think that these moments of retreat, which we all try to experience, are something very fulfilling. It allows us to bring balance to our lives and attempt to avoid being consumed by stress, which at times is very intense.
Our journey along the Maas and the Ourthe ends in the Ardennes. It has revealed the many faces of European waterways. Just how humans and the climate will shape it in the future remains to be seen.